Welcome to Now and Next in Public Affairs, brought to you by Helio Intelligence, which is the home of de Havilland and Forefront. I'm Jack Tolbert, and today we are in Brussels to discuss the future of the public affairs profession with my guest today, Vlad Olteanu. Vlad, welcome to the episode.
Many thanks for having me.
Vlad, we are going to talk a little bit about what the future of public affairs looks like here in Brussels. But before we do that, I'm going to ask you a little bit about your experience, please. My research tells me that you've been in Brussels and worked in Brussels for over 25 years. You've had various roles, Linklaters, Japan Tobacco International, as well as your current role at Loyens Loeff. So are you okay to talk us through a bit about how your experience has evolved?
Absolutely. Indeed, I'm in Brussels since 1999. So at a time at which the European Union was much smaller. So went through the various stages of growing of the European Union, the 2003, 7, and the following, actually. In terms of personal interest, I think I came to Brussels originally for a year. That is a long, very long year by now. So I came because at the university in Romania where I was also working with the then Romanian president, who was also a teacher at the university, and who thought it would be very good for me to come to Brussels and get specialized in European affairs, because of course Romania at the time was following the path towards accession. It succeeded indeed 7 years later, so in 2007. But what I found here was a very interesting combination for me. So I combined mathematics, economics, and legal training. And at the time, Brussels was a fantastic place for the intersection of the three. Competition law was big. Those are the good old times of .com bubbles. They come back. One thing I've learned in 26 years of Brussels is those things do come back. So the .coms, now they may be called differently. They may be called crypto. They may be called artificial intelligence to some extent, but they do come back. And at that moment, basically, I had a choice to go and grow into this intersection or go back to Romania and probably keep only one of the elements of that intersection. Clearly, at the beginning, I was more specializing in maths, economics, and a bit of political science. That's what I did at the Free University of Brussels. So European studies was linked to political sciences at the time. So it was that more. The law part came later, came in France and came later, so came towards 2007. So in 2000, I wouldn't have had that possibility to go into law. I think if I would have to do it again, I will do it again, but probably earlier if I could. And earlier if I could, because I think there are two benefits, and I'm trying to take those benefits to my kids. I think one should know when to stop. And there are two moments: the moment that you decide to stop, okay, because of age, career, whatever, and there is the moment where you would like to stop simply because you want to stop before you begin. So the famous sabbatical year, which I will very much encourage my kids to take it before university studies and see a bit of the world, discover for themselves, and make a choice according to that. I was lucky, without doing that, to make choices which actually fit the bill for me at this point in time, and I was happy with them throughout. However, you cannot guarantee that luck. So I think one should stop before starting. And I think through the conversation, we'll see probably more moments at which someone should stop, including institutions, the union, or indeed corporates, should stop before starting and think about how best to start and where do they really want to go.
We will definitely get into some of that stuff, and we will definitely get into AI as well. What I'm interested to hear is a bit about what was life like in Brussels in 1999, 2000? Was it still a bubble? Was it a bubble back then? Because I know it's obviously a bubble now.
I think it was, if I would use a metaphor of bubbles in the wine world, I would say it was a wine without bubbles, very calm. Almost no alcohol in it at the time. So it was a bit of a watery zone. So it was much calmer than, I would say, after 2007. I would say the first period, so 1999 to 2007, was a period in which things were happening in their time. Let's put it this way. It's not that there were no emergencies, but emergencies tended to actually dilute themselves and not immediately show to your attention and definitely not remain in your focus for long. It had to do with many things. We said the dot-com bubble, which for the ones of us who actually started with the modem internet, has a different meaning. You literally needed to use your keyboard and actually come in with a name plus a dot plus a com or a net or whatever that would be in the syntax, and exceed patiently a website which may take, and I know that for the young generation that sounds like not possible, but which may take minutes to download, literally minutes. So emergencies take minutes to download. And each time you made an operation, other minutes were necessary. And those are times of things that disappeared in the meantime. Netscape at the time was big. Netscape Navigator was the navigator. Where is it today? So things disappeared in there. That period was basically marked by that. It was not a period of fast consumption. It was a period of slower consumption. Then we came to the generation of adapting the internet to your pocket. And with that is the BlackBerry generation and the moment of 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, which would have been probably a moment of acceleration. Only that at that moment we crossed one of the worst economic crises we knew, the banking and financial crisis, and that clearly had an impact and an influence. It's the first time that I saw the union actually crossing its powers significantly and speeding up. 1999 to 2007 was a period in which, yes, there were, of course, regulations, yes, there were directives, but the speed at which they were discussed, negotiated, agreed was quite slow. The financial crisis put an immediate, a real emergency. And at the time, of course, technically we were much more evolved. We had sudden internet in our pockets. We could see things much faster, react to them much faster. Then I think we saw a period of equalization, I would call it. So the period after, with the commissions 2014 to 19, which was a pretty stable period. Yes, we had a number of acts there as well, but we had a lot of renewal of the older acts. And we had one major event, which in retrospective was not perceived as major, which was the Crimea moment, which now we know that was to be seen probably in a much more first page mode than it was at the time. And then we had the Commission 2019 to 24, where things accelerated tremendously for a number of reasons. I think the first one, of course, was the epidemics, COVID. That commission has started what should have been a mandate of renewal of the mandates. If we remember the Commission 2019 to 24, there was Mr. Timmermans, the big agenda, the big Green Deal, and the big responsibilization of businesses and of citizens, a bit of the Save the World paradigm, which actually produced a number of results, but at the same time became also a Save Yourself paradigm because of the COVID, because of the emergency around it. And then, of course, we had the 2022 Russian war against Ukraine, which actually added, coming just after COVID. If we remember, COVID was taking at least 2 good years of our lives, 2020 and 2021, with various lockdowns and the likes. 2022, the start of 2022, when the invasion happened, February, that is a moment at which we, I think, were starting to see life in a free mode again. No more masks. We had vaccines, we were at version 3 or 4 of the job. We were seeing futures, okay, we come back to a form of normal. And that normality skipped away very fast indeed. And with it, quite many of what was considered to be the norm in European affairs and in Europe, because all that European affairs space was based on one big prediction, which was prediction of peace and prediction of ever-growing economic activity and ever-growing markets. And that presumption didn't stop on February 2022, but it was seriously shaken. And we see even now the consequences. It's still, in 2022, if somebody would have said the largest part of the EU budget will be spent on defense, people would have smiled politely, and probably most would have left the room. And nowadays, when we say that, we talk about a fact. So it changed quite a lot the way in which we look at the world, including in the public affairs bubble. What is expected from us? Emergencies do come back and back more often. They are more and more critical. We are not necessarily trained for that. We are not trained in defense or in defense folders or following defense spending or defense capabilities, but we need to do it. Why? Because it affects more and more our lives. It affects more and more the clients, the budgets, the ways in which we see the world.
Vlad, thank you. There is a lot for me to say on that. My initial reflections are that your chronological summary is absolutely brilliant, and I think not that you will take up this path in life, but I think if ever you wanted to be a history or a politics teacher, I think that the chronology element that you've given is definitely on the money in that sense. I want to talk a little bit about the institutions, actually, because you articulate very well how the institutions have adapted as a result of kind of external events, and they've become quicker. And obviously time and technology has also helped with that. When we think about the future, and part of the discussion today is about tech and AI, how do you think the institutions are going to have to adapt in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years here in Brussels?
That is a very, very good question. I think there are two schools of thought, or at least two schools of thought about it. I think one is the traditional school of thought, which would say we have adapted in the past to emerging threats, challenges, or opportunities. I would argue that to threats, yes. I just gave the example of COVID. Again, nobody would have thought that public procurement in the EU is possible at such a scale, under such speedy conditions, and it was possible. Of course, the threat was existential, or at least at the beginning of it, it seemed that this is really existential. So the reaction was probably going faster because of that as well. Have we adapted as European institutions and generally here in the bubble, have we adapted fast enough to challenges? I think probably yes to some of the challenges. If those challenges were in the immediate attention of the bubble, but not necessarily to challenges which were either philosophical or more market-based. So coming from the outside world into us. Another example here, and I gave it before, is Crimea. Crimea could have been perceived as an existential challenge, and therefore would have had a different response. Faster, deeper response. To the opportunities, unfortunately, I think we have adapted the least at the institutional scale. I think the businesses generally do adapt well. We look at opportunities. This is our bread and butter. We need to find them, and we need to be good at making something good out of them. I think from the institutions part, opportunities were basically a bit the lame duck, if I may say. And why I'm saying that? When you regulate, and the school of regulation up to very recently, to this commission and to the omnibuses, new habit, let's put it this way, the simplification habit, the instinct of the institutions was very much driven by regulations which will add up. And until Frans Timmermans, until 2019, we had this collection over collection over collection. So we're doing one, the second, the third, and the fifth, and the 10th. Frans Timmermans came with an idea which was partially implemented. Unfortunately, if it would have been fully implemented, we would have been in a different place today. And that idea was summed up by himself in a brilliant way, which was 10 out, 1 in. I say brilliant way, why? Because he said first 10 out, and then 1 in. So not 1 in and then 10 out. Secondly, because yes, there was clearly an over-regulatory mode. And that over-regulatory mode didn't allow opportunities to flourish in Europe. If you look at Europe, Europe is a research powerhouse. Most of the things which had a real market impact came originally from Europe. We can look at many things, but mobile phones, Nokia, Ericsson, they were actually from the north of Europe. And nowadays, European Union doesn't build one single phone, one single smartphone. If we look at computing, we had not only a tradition in very good computing schools, very good mathematics schools, be it Oxford, be it Leiden University, but look at Linus Torvalds, look at Linux, look at the basis of Unix, which actually gave birth to Apple. If we look at all that, well, we kind of lost it. We made it, but then it went somewhere else. What is the very well-known use of Linux today? It's Android. And that's no longer European. The phone is not European, the software is not European. So we kind of had a number of breakthroughs that we gave a bit to the others. We financed that research, we used public money to finance that research, and it went away. And it went away because the big opportunities were not really seized at the moment where they should have been seized. So we have a big market, that's fantastic, but is it a real functioning internal market? Or is it a sum of 27, now 28 before, markets, which function to some degree together and to some degree differently? That's one question. The other question is, okay, assuming that we have all this, do we have the finance power of a market? The USA is not that it's just a more integrated market. It's a much faster and bigger capital market to start with. Whereas the European Nasdaq, that would have been a great opportunity to seize for Europe. Build that European Nasdaq, build that capital capacity to actually grow the economy from within. But that means for the Commission, probably it would have meant decision, but also education. So we need to change this education, which is very risk adverse. I studied in a few systems, including in the United States ones. I don't think that the United States one is basically, in my experience, the most pushing towards daring. It is very pushing indeed. Personally, I found the one in my education who pushed me towards daring the most was the Singapore one. The National University of Singapore, I did a program with them, which was design thinking, and I've been pushed outside of any limit I would have imagined, simply because there is no limit. And that type of education actually makes you look at things and opportunities differently. But those opportunities are not really seized in Europe, and we see it today. Timmermans' reform was partially successful, very partially so, which basically brought this commission to start the simplification. And why is that? Because, of course, competitiveness became a big issue. High regulation is not costly only in terms of money, but also in terms of time. Innovation, and you mentioned IE and technology, they are both very innovative fields. Innovation doesn't happen where high regulation is suffocating that innovation. So if you need to follow and complete 20,000 pages to get started on a program, you probably are going to go and look somewhere else. And there is another element which will penalize, I think, Europe for at least in the short term, for IE in particular development, and that's the cost of energy. IE is very energy intensive. You need to be able to have access to I will not say cheap energy, but definitely affordable energy. And you need to generate profits out of any project, including the IE project. The IE project is not yet generating significant profits. It is, for the moment, a cost base. We invest into something which we hope will generate benefits, but that's the issue. The issue is that we invest. So for the moment, it's a cost. Lower the cost, probably higher the benefits. So in other words, if we can arrive there with lower costs and we make lower benefits, still it's benefits. But if the costs are high and the benefits are lower, we may end up in a very difficult scenario and situation. And in that, Europe started late, has the problem with the energy, started late with the models. So OpenAI as a base became the base. Yes, Mistral is trying. Yes, Anthropic is trying, but Anthropic is not European. Mistral is. So actually in Europe, you don't have, I would say, a base. The Commission did what it could do, i.e. regulate. The EU was the first one to regulate the AI as such. And then it tried to create another thing, which is the uptake of AI. So now there are a number of guidelines, a number of acts coming from the Commission with this idea to have the hubs, so the member state hubs where AI would be available for citizens and businesses. I would have argued that for businesses, probably for small and medium-sized, highly AI-dependent businesses, this does make sense. So in other words, you lower their costs at the startup phase. They still need the capital market here if you want them to grow. If not, they will not scale up here. For citizens, I would have argued that that's not really necessary, because now we have AI in our pockets. We have it on our phones. And I think we can invest our own time to learn intelligent prompting and get that AI to work for us pretty well at an affordable, quite low cost. Be it Copilot, be it OpenAI, ChatGPT, be it whatever model we'll take, the cost is not huge. And we can afford it and we have it in our pocket. So public investment there, I don't really see it necessary. I see it necessary, however, in the schools, not in the universities. So we should not start with the university. We should start with the school and try to make the most out of it at the level of children. Explain to them where AI can help a lot, where AI can be a problem in their education. It should not be a replacement for own thinking. It should not be a replacement for mathematic thinking. It should be an enhancer of your own thinking. Yes, it's great if you know one way to solve a mathematical problem to go to AI and ask how many other ways there are. Can you show that to me? Can you open the world for me? And then suddenly I don't know one, I know 9. And maybe that will help me with a further mathematic problem because I will understand, okay, I can look from various angles to this problem. And the same goes for life, for public affairs, for many other areas. AI can be an enabler. But to make it an enabler, investment in education is necessary. As I said, cost of energy should be controlled because that will mean that capacity-wise will be fine. And then the last point, I think a very honest discussion with businesses where they intake AI and where they see it fit is very valuable. Instead of telling them you need to take more AI. In some cases, yes, they need to, and probably it will be good for them. But even there, where should this be put in? Where can it be put in? And in some cases, I don't think that AI will really impact the market to the level we expected. Even at normal jobs, or what you call normal jobs, I can see that yes, independent driving may become a trend and may work, which means that probably less human drivers will be needed in a professional capacity. I don't see, for instance, the same, to give another example, for hairdressers. I don't think that ChatGPT is going to hairdress us soon. So there are limitations there, including in manual jobs. Both of them are quite manual as jobs. In the office and for us, like in a law firm or in a public affairs consultancy, I would see that, there is this scare of AI at the first step. So if you look at the Big Four, they made a number of decisions when we are not going to hire more and we are going to give the same level of revenues at the new entrants because basically AI is replacing some of them. I think it's a danger to go to that onto that route. And why? Because you don't invest in a newcomer, you invest in your future. You cannot arrive at a partner stage if you're not a junior associate. So you need to start somewhere with humans and bring them up. And the selection system was basically we take brilliant young minds, and out of that group of brilliant young minds, each of them will find a place, be it a partner, be it a senior associate, be it an university professor after 20 years in a firm or in a public affairs consultancy, but they were formed by the senior level to actually replace them one day. I still remember my first law firms and my first replacements and my first placements in public affairs and public relations. And they are all, I was in all of those cases surrounded by seniors who are very happy that I learned, and then they will retire and they will leave to somebody that mission, what they saw as a mission to serve clients in that field. And this with AI at the junior level coming risks not creating the more senior levels. Because if you decrease the population, you increase the risk that in that population, not enough people will grow up where you want them to grow up. So it's a quite risky bet, I would say. AI can do many things, but be very aware in your context, am I a driver or am I a hairdresser? That's a fundamental question. It's a simple one, but one which needs an answer.
This is the nub of the issue for me at the moment in my thinking. And I've discussed this on previous episodes. So for the benefit of the listeners, you might be listening to me repeat myself. But when it comes to talent and pipeline in public affairs, not just in London or in the UK, but here in Brussels, that career path is pretty clear. And most people kind of tread that relatively consistent career path. And ironically, we're in Brussels here in December, and your colleagues now were previously colleagues of mine in terms of where they've come from and how they started out here. So that for me is the nub of the issue. What is going to happen in 5 years, in 10 years time, if you don't get the next generation of young people coming in to public affairs here in Brussels? So what's that going to mean for the bubble? That for me is There's more questions and concerns at this stage for me on that topic than answers right now.
Yeah. And I think it's a very, very good and very deep question, because it goes to the why do we exist fundamentally, why we are doing what we are doing in public affairs. And if I look at what I have done myself, public affairs, public relations, which is more communications, and then the regulatory part that I do as well, there is a common element, and it's all about people. It's all about convincing in one way or the other people. Even the regulatory job is about that. So many people think, well, in regulatory, you do some technical stuff. Well, yes, you do some technical analysis for sure, but you need to convince people that that technical analysis stands, that that's the one standard that they want to actually apply. In public relations, I don't need to speak a lot about it. It's communication. It's all about how you phrase a message, how the audience perceives it, what the feedback is, and how do you adapt to that feedback. So it's very clearly, again, about people. In public affairs, it's outmost only about people. So it's not only convincing people, and I think many people will say, yes, public affairs fundamentally is about convincing other people. I think it's first and foremost listening to other people. Listening is a skill of its own. Better the listener, probably better the thinker after the listener, because of course you have the time to actually really understand what the other party really wants. And if you know that, you can adapt. But if you don't know that and you make assumptions, you will not. And that's another risk with early artificial intelligence application in public affairs. Artificial intelligence tends to be based and has to be based on a very mathematical binary system way of thinking, which is 1 or 0, true or not true. Public affairs is everything but 1 and 0. Many people will tell you, no, it's 1 or it's 0. You are either right or you are wrong. I don't think that in almost no case I know, someone was fully right, 100%, and fully wrong, 0% right. The whole gray area in between, you may be 98% right, and 2% maybe not so right. The whole gray area in between them is the area in which public affairs thrives. And that area is a bit lost in the artificial intelligence world, because in that world, it's neither 1 or 0. And if you would ask now an advanced language model, and you start doing prompting in a more complex way, let's put it this way, and you will start asking, will this regulation pass or not? It will look at the past, and it will do a mathematical average. And if you just say that, probably the answer will be 55 yes, 45 no, which in real life is never true. It's never true. At the end of the day, it will be either 100% or 0 in that case, because either it passes or it doesn't. But you will have those percentages. If you start talking to people and listening carefully to their message, and you are experienced enough, you will probably be much better at predicting yes, it does, or no, it doesn't. And from there, it's a world of opportunity again, because if you know it does, you know what to do next. If you know it doesn't, you know what to do next too, probably. So it's important to go into that zone, gray zone. And that's very much something for humans. And what I'm afraid is, if we will use artificial intelligence, especially to the junior level, to replace independent thinking, that nuance of the gray will be a bit lost. Dependency on a 1 or 0 will become very high. Belief in that system will become higher. But belief is a double sword now, because it can go with you or against you. And I think President Macron was very right in saying, there is a problem, fundamental problem, if people start asking an AI model, with whom should I vote? Simply because, of course, that is something that the AI model can only respond based on how well it knows the people, but also on how well it knows the information about the contenders, the system, and what is the value that it puts to that information. And that's very much an algorithmical possibility. So in other words, there are ways to increase or decrease the value. And if I do that, I will probably influence people, but I will replace their own independent thing. I think, again, if the question is, give to me the main elements in the programs for me to make my mind, that's a different thing from with whom should I vote or what should I do next.
Absolutely. The eradication or the erosion of the ability to think clearly, think critically, is quite frightening, actually. And you articulate public affairs really well in terms of it is a grey area. And it is a profession that is underpinned by people, and people are not the same. People are different. They have different variables, different drivers, etc. So it's really quite thought-provoking actually to think about some of the benefits that AI can in theory bring, but also some of the dangers that we see, or some of the risks perhaps. One thing, just going back slightly, one thing I wanted to pick up that you mentioned earlier was around some of the, when we were talking about the kind of the chronology of how things have changed over time, one thing that came up was around emergencies. So we also had the financial crisis in 2008, 2009, and then Crimea was 2014, COVID 2020, and then Russia's invasion of Ukraine was 2022. The sense I get is that from listening to you is, and from speaking to others, I might add, is that the institutions at times of emergencies can and do act quicker. They can adapt, and they do seem to adapt. When it comes to public affairs and emergencies, would it be a fair observation to think that that's when public affairs can play a real part in adding value internally?
I would hope so. And I think generally, in my experience, be it corporates or be it in-house, be it with law firms, be it with consultancies as well, I always saw public affairs as not as a cost, but as an opportunity for businesses. I think, seeing public affairs as a compliance plus department is something that is seen quite a lot, fortunately, but it is very much looking again at the immediate threat rather than the huge opportunity. So you said very rightly, institutions and corporations are quite good at acting in a crisis moment. Why? Because the crisis crystallizes the threat. It brings the threat clearly in front of their own eyes, and it forces them to react to that threat as quickly and as thoroughly as they possibly can, because it's quite existential. I mean, everything we mentioned before, it's quite existential. So they will react to that. The reptilian brain will take over for a moment. We will arrive at a point at which that reptilian brain needs to be calmed. The rational part kicks in, but it knows that it has very limited time to actually give a response, and a powerful response. Unfortunately for the opportunity part, that's not, the same mechanism does not apply. That's not the case. And why is that? Because opportunities are many, are spread over a spectrum. There is no sense of emergency to most of them, unless a threat comes in. And you see it very well with the artificial intelligence fights and models now, where who is the best and who is the fastest and who is the most popular, but also who goes first to the stock exchange or who doesn't, plays a key role. So from the full opportunity spectrum, now we are at threat, which may be existential, although all of them are doing pretty well, actually, in the big models. So they're doing pretty well, but if somebody is doing better, that may become immediately a threat, because it's a very fast-moving world, and it sends under the world. So they need to be able to react to that. However, there are many opportunities still there. And if you look at the opportunity in the same way in which you would look at a threat, you'll probably be much better, because you'll be in the positive. You'll have more options to choose. You'll not need to necessarily, go there just because that's the deep down hole that you need to take, because now you are in a threat and those are the options. And you have option 1 and 2. In the opportunities world, you'll have always, almost always more than that. The importance is to apply the same thing and to focus. So once you have decided something, follow it up. Don't let it go. And I think in the businesses, we see it quite a lot, in the public affairs as well, asking your team to follow one regulation thoroughly, or one regulation plus, one directive plus a delegated act thoroughly. Because this is actually the one which is going to affect you for 90%. And you can live up with a certain level of non-permanent focus on the 10%. Your core business is safe because the core business part is insured. Is one thing. Asking your team to basically follow up everything which comes in the space, and this happens also quite a lot, it means that in reality, very few things are followed through, because it's a human. We all specialize a bit, and we all specialize a bit on many criteria. One of them is personal passion, personal, preference. We look at things, and I may look at an act and I may be very passionate about it because it's something that resonates well with me. And by the way, in my team, we need to follow up a number of things, but I always try to distribute that based also on that criteria. Do you really like that or not really? And if it's not really, does somebody else? And quite usually people say, if you leave them the space, people will tell you. I would prefer this. Well, maybe try that. And be as important, almost more important is to be able to say no. And if you want to be a value function, you need to say more no than yes. It's a very difficult thing to do, but it's a thing that, funny enough, will create more friends than enemies. Many people, I think, would believe, this will create enemies, because in a corporate, I would say no to another function. But there are many nuances of no, a bit like 0-1 and the gray area. No but, no in that particular order, but in this particular. Or have you thought about that? That's also a no. All that that gray area needs to be explored much more. And I think it will be more human to do that. And then your prompting, funny enough, in a 1-0-1 system will be better as well. Because that's where I think IA prompting is very powerful, when the gray goes into the prompting. So when it's no longer binary, but all the beautiful numbers which are not natural, which are rational, real, the 0 point somethings, when they kick into the game. If you learn how to kick them into the prompting game well enough, and that's again a skill you get from public affairs, interacting with people, you will have a more powerful and a more humane artificial intelligence system next to you.
Thank you, Vlad. I think there's a lot to be said for the actions and behaviours of institutions, government, corporates, when the status quo is disrupted, and what they can and have delivered on in the past. And that whole discussion around the mentality around that is something that we could go into. We are a bit short for time, so we're going to move on to a few lighter questions to finish. The first one is, what would be your single piece of advice, single piece of non-negotiable advice for someone here in Brussels that's starting out in public affairs today?
The non-negotiable piece of advice would be curious. Be curious. You don't know what life will throw at you. Life will throw at you. That you can be sure of. But you don't know what. And I think be curious is the number one. If you remain curious, you will get the most of almost any situation. I think after that, I would say another one, which is non-negotiable as a second, will be start with why. Don't start with how. Many young people start with how. If I would come to somebody starting the job, because of the university, probably the how was very important. The what was very important as well. No, start with why. And if the why is not clear, make sure that that's very clear before you start anything. I think you are going to see that result. You are going to see a progression of yourself, a much faster progression of yourself in almost any organization. President Obama had one say, he said, if you want to go through an organization, go very high up, fix a problem and continue. Fix the problems, find another problem, fix it. And he says, I guarantee you that somebody upstairs will notice. Well, the people who fix the problems are the people, in my mind, who start with why. The why is a very cruel but very powerful question.
Very good piece of advice. In terms of Brussels, it's a very close network of people here. There's however many thousands of official lobbyists, lots of events. Who would you say has got the best networking event in town?
Oh, that is a very, very good question. I think, but that's a personal preference. I prefer much more the smaller events, the ones at which you can actually speak humanly to the person or persons next to you and have a meaningful exchange. So for me, for instance, events at which I go and I like a lot are the AECA, the American European Community Association. They organize a number of, it's pretty much once a month or so, lunch-ons, where small groups of people, usually 30, 40 maximum, but sometimes even 20, will discuss with somebody, with a regulator, but it may be a corporate person or somebody senior, about something interesting which happens in the world. Not necessarily regulatory-wise, but general. I find that very valuable. The same thing would go for Eurocomment, not necessarily a thing which is very well known in Brussels. It is made up, and the group there is made up by senior people, generally. It's always a pleasure to exchange with experience. I always learn from experience. I'm laughing with them because I'm telling, I learn from you as much as I learn from my kids. In the way that my kids are curious and are asking questions that I never thought of, and they come with things I never thought that would have gone into such a way. And it's very interesting to ask seniors how a certain decision was made after you made all your assumptions with your experience in your mind, and you thought there were 50 committees discussing it, 5 committees validating, and then you suddenly ask the question and you get the answer. No, it was a decision at 8:15 in the morning because there was a meeting starting at 8:20. And it goes to show that you can always be surprised, and it's always good to learn from that level of experience.
That's very good. Reflecting on your 26 years, which has been your favorite commission term?
Very good question too. I don't think that I had one in which I would say, I would absolutely love it. But what I would say, there is one which actually was very stable while facing significant events, such as the Brexit, for instance. And that is the commission term of President Juncker. I think President Juncker was a very, very experienced politician. He had his own way of dealing with colleagues. We will all remember, I think, the nice jokes he made with heads of state and his famous kiss blessing of Prime Minister Orban. But I think what he had was a very, very good ability to reach deals in a fast and comprehensive way. And he went through crises. Again, those are crisis periods. Again, we mentioned Crimea, we mentioned the 2014-19 period. So we mentioned a period in which, yes, there were significant events happening. And still, I think that commission was stable and very moderate as well in the way in which they regulated the market. If you look at the number of acts they passed, not a significant, a huge number, but at the same time, if you look at the depth in which they went into certain types of regulation, that was quite something. So for me, I think if I would have to look at the terms, I would say probably Commissioner Juncker would be the one, of course, perfectible, yes, but stable and quite good at dealing with external shocks in a predictable for the world way and still in a good way for the Union. So without exacerbating passions around the Union.
Thank you. And finally, what's the plenary session moment you'll never forget?
Oh, there are many. I think in that category, there are many for many different reasons. I think, in some cases, it's because one act which became your baby and you needed to defend it and you had amendments to it passed. But I think the moments that actually are the ones that I'll probably not forget are either the funny moments, and there were a number of funny moments in plenaries, ranging from mics not working and people continuing speaking, including people continuing shouting with the mic not working, so I saw that as well. Or things like bringing, not many people know, but we have it now actually, I think, even on YouTube, if I'm not mistaken, some members of the parliament who brought in the plenary little animals, for instance, which is also something very interesting indeed. So I think those funny moments are the ones who I will keep with me. I think the more serious ones, the more professional ones will always stay. But I think in 26 years, the second category actually presents itself more and more because you have more and more babies in the proposals, while the first category remains somehow distinct because those things do not repeat themselves so often. So I think I will always remember those funny moments.
Very good. Vlad, thank you so much for joining me today and thank you for hosting here in Brussels. It's been great. My thanks as always to my colleague Ollie Foster, who's our in-house producer. Perhaps you have a view on the future of public affairs and would like to share, or you'd like to add to the discussion yourself. Please follow the link in the show's bio, which will direct you to our feedback page for Helio Intelligence, which is the home of de Havilland and Forefront.